So in the previous video, we kind of mentioned the idea of anticipations as this cognitive framework that tries to explain human reactions and experience in various time-based media settings, from music, text, or playing with a dog, and a kind of game-like situation where the underlying principle is that to create tension or to manipulate tension and resolution, you have to create anticipations. So whoever is receiving the information, whoever is listening to the music, has his own ways of predicting, understanding where music can go. And then by playing around with these expectations, you can actually create and different ways of engaging with the story, creating tension, right? I mean, that's somehow why we want to. We don't really want always the music to be predictable, unless if it's a relaxing music, if it's some kind of ambient music, setting an atmosphere that could be just putting you in a sense where you always predict something, but you kind of expect this to be pretty calming and predictable. If you want to create tension, if you want to create surprise, this is where breaking out some of the rules comes in. And of course, if a lot of things break, and maybe that's the reason why a lot of the contemporary music is related to the abstract compositions are related to more of a tension, is because many times you are kind of lost. This is music that is hard to predict, and because it's hard to predict, it also creates this uneasy sense of something bad that is going to happen. And maybe this is part of the reaction that we might have to contemporary music, but it depends really. If once you get used to it, you start finding out some other details in that music that might totally change your perception of that music. Now, can a computer actually kind of think about reacting to music? So, so this chapter or this page kind of discusses some of our work on modeling anticipations by trying to analyze music and seeing if music itself, if it's predictable, does the human respond in a parallel way? So the assumption is that there is sort of like this communication channel going where the listener has his own models of music, he has his own anticipations, and then the evidence comes in, the music keeps flowing, and then you basically have this slow and fast brain appraisal where you basically have reactions, and you have this appraisal of whether your predictions were correct or not. So we've been doing some research. This is actually now almost 15 years old, the result, but it was one of the early studies where we tried to explore the relations between cognitive measures such as familiarity, sense of familiarity recognition or categorization, and also emotional force, okay, which is a function of anticipation, with things that could be measured from the music. So you can actually take the recording and represent this with some mathematical ways that allow you to now see how similar the music is to itself, how many repetitions there are, and you can also see how predictable the music is. So the purpose of this page is really kind of introduce you to this research field where the relation between what we perceive and the music itself, or the signal, okay, are being quantified by developing new techniques that can actually predict music, model music, and eventually also the same principles could be applied to generating music automatically. So in this research where we have kind of explored, these different ways of how the repetition is happening and how predictable it is, we can derive these kind of profiles by analyzing the music for these statistical properties. You can basically look, and this is for specific Bach preludes, you can actually go and see that there are different predictability levels happening, and also in terms of repetitions. Okay, so some things repeat. There is a lot of repetitions towards the end. So one of the things we could do is actually try to go and analyze and find for instance, where is the musical climax? So with these tools, we kind of try to analyze musical pieces, and we can actually find across different recordings, these are like different performances of the same piece, we found that pretty much the peak, okay, where we have some combination of anticipation or long-term and short-term predictability, they're characteristic of musical climaxes, okay? So this is kind of an example of trying to claim that there are ways of playing with short and long-term expectations, and by trying to understand how you create the long-term form, the long-term structure, or how how your expectation, your level of excitement or anticipation, the emotional force is driven, they combine together to different ways of creating an effect on the musician. So specifically, if I want to go back to this example, because it might be a little intricate to see what we're trying to show here was, for instance, we can show that musical climax, and usually music kind of goes and develops into some kind of a climax and then the resolution. Of course, there are many little climaxes that happen, so we cannot really kind of affirmatively say, there is one main climax, but in movies there is this always lost point. In many dramas, there is this point where really everything comes together. So we were looking for these climaxes in musical pieces, and we wanted to make sure that this happens across different ways of telling the story, different performances, not just that this might be an artifact of the way the music itself is playing. So this is just kind of one way to check this hypothesis across many different versions of the same piece. So we show that the musical climax happens when something new happens on the structural level. So music has structural novelty, new material is introduced, okay? But actually this new material, because it has to be some kind of predictable, something really happens. These are passages that's short phrases that kind of keep running, pushing the material forward. Actually, we found that the music locally is more predictable, okay? So the preparation of music, this kind of short-term feeling good about this, it's like a prelude that kind of sets your expectations, and then really there's a sharp turn which is really changing the whole structure. This is one way that we found that climax could be detected. So this play of short-term expectations and long-term surprise really was something that allowed us kind of to look at this prelude. And I just brought this one example because I think this is kind of pretty evident that when you listen to this musical piece and you get to the point where you feel that there is a climax, you can kind of go back and ask yourself, regardless of the mathematical analysis, if you can see how predictable the music was there a new element introduced, and what happens in that music that actually made this, a point that stands out. So this is just kind of an example of the relations that you can have between ways of analyzing music in terms of maybe some mathematical ways, and how you react to them in a cognitive way. And I think this insight is important also to understand that once we want to create tools that automatically can create meaningful musical experiences, we need to have better and deeper understanding also of our own perception of what makes us react to music and musical changes in different ways. So that this is really fascinating. At least it fascinates to me. It's a fascinating field where you can combine creative aspects and emotional aspects with mathematical models. So yep, I'll open this to some questions.